Welcome to our recorded webinar. This is Introduction to SiriusXM Weather, Understanding SiriusXM Weather's Key Features. And I'm Geoff Leech, and co-hosting is Dan Dickerson. We're both from the SiriusXM Marine team, and we're based out of the DC office. So thanks again for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started with the first shot. Now, by the way, this is an overview on SiriusXM Marine Weather, not specific to anyone's particular chart plotter. As you may or may not know, the user interface is slightly different from one chart plotter manufacturer to the next. All the same features, but just a little different user interface. Okay, so here are SiriusXM Marine Weather's value points. This is up-to-date graphical weather displayed directly on your chart plotter or your multifunction display, not displayed over a cell phone. So you see it right in front of you while you're navigating at the helm. We have complete coverage. It's not based on cellular networks. This is satellite-based. So it comes directly down from satellite to your multifunction display through your weather receiver. And the thing that we do not mention very often, or not enough in my opinion, is seasonal suspend. There's a lot of boaters out there in the northern latitudes, or that are occasionally getting their boats repaired. Perhaps you're up on the hard and you're not using your weather. Well, there's no sense in paying for your subscription if you're not using your boat. So we offer what we call a seasonal suspend program up to 6 months at a time. You simply call in and you tell them when you want to turn it back on, and it more or less puts your account in holding, does not charge you while the account is on hold, and then does not subject you to a reactivation fee when the service turns back on or when a signal goes back out to you. Much preferred method than deactivating. Deactivation, actually, you have to sign back up, and then you get a reactivation fee when you start back. So seasonal suspend, good thing to know. All right, this is our most common feature. This is weather radar and lightning. Looks probably very familiar to most folks because you see very similar images on TV or on your cell phone. What we're looking at here is a boat, and Dan, if you could take the cursor and just show us where the boat is, right there. And the idea here is you get your weather radar overlay on your chart plotter. You can also see lightning strikes. And in places that have common little storm cells that pop up out of nowhere, like Florida in this image, and this isn't just one storm cell. Obviously, this is a whole system working its way through. But what we're depicting here is you can see exactly what's happening around you, and you can skirt your way through the different cells if you can. And what we would suggest, and what we hear from a lot of boaters out there that are using SiriusXM Marine Weather, is zooming out and getting kind of a broad brush overview of what's going on around you, and then zooming back in and seeing the specific radar image as it surrounds your boat. All right.
So there's also an animation function with this display. Not only can you look at the current image, which updates about every 2.5 to 5 minutes, but you can also play a loop feature, so you can see which way the storm is coming from and possibly get around the worst part of the storm. So here we're showing the wind and wave condition display that's available on the MFD using SiriusXM. Again, you can see the boat in the middle of the screen, and we have two different symbols. There is a black symbol and a red symbol. The black symbol is your wind information symbol, and from this one we can see that the wind is coming out of the southeast quadrant, and it is headed towards the northwest quadrant. So the wind is going from this direction to this direction. The way we can tell that is the little dot on this symbol, that's a fixed point, and this long shaft that you see is pointing in the direction that the wind is coming from. The little indication at the bottom, you can see this looks like a backwards L. That tick mark right there is telling me the wind speed. So the wind is coming out of the southeast at 10 knots here. This symbol, the wind is coming out of the southeast at 15 knots. So the wind is a little heavier here, and then it starts to die down a little bit when it gets here. You'll especially often see this when you do get close to land. It starts out being 15, and then when you're getting closer to land, it's going to slow it down a little bit. So in this picture, we can see that the wind and waves are going the same direction. If they were opposing one another, then the symbols wouldn't be pointing at each other, and it would be choppy out there. So it's a good feature to be able to tell at a glance, what the conditions are like. Say if you're still at the dock and planning on heading out, you can see whether or not it's choppy out there based on the wind and wave conditions. Now, the other piece of information that's on this screen is the wave height, and that's represented as a color. So we can see this pale blue color here is the indication of wave height, and the way we find out what that is we go to the legend, which is over here on the side of the screen. With most units, you can bring up that legend and see what the color means. Basically, the color palette is dark blue color is waves 1 foot or less. These are probably 4 or 5 footers, and it goes from dark blue to green, yellow, and then red. You don't want to be there if it's red out there, basically. The next piece of information that's on this screen is the wave period. This line right here, and there's a number 4 right there. That 4 is telling us that the waves in this vicinity are 4 seconds apart. So those are the wind and wave features. And again, many units will bring up a legend on screen, so you can see here's the indication of our wind, what the different tick marks on the wind symbol mean. A small tick mark is 5 knots, a long one is 10, and a triangle shape would be 50. So this symbol, as you see it right here, denotes 50, 65 mile an hour winds, 65 mile an hour winds. And if we were using this symbol as a reference point, it would be telling us the wind is coming from the north when it's perfectly like that. So that's wind from the north. And again, over here it's flipped upside down, kind of the other direction. That would be wind from the southeast. So next we go to our sea surface temperature information. Now the color on screen no longer represents sea temperature. No longer represents wave height information. It represents sea temperature. And again, the color is the designator. So here we have dark blue water, and we can see over here dark blue. That means it's about 72 degree water. Over here we've got reddish orange. We can see that's about 80 degree water. So this information is what the fishermen really like to see. The best bite activity is going to occur right along where the temperature is changing. We call that a temp break. So that's where your best bite activity is going to be, in areas where the temperature is changing. Another feature that is useful here is for detecting the Gulf Stream. You can see this picture was taken right off Cape Hatteras, and basically this long red band here, that is the Gulf Stream. So, for instance, down in Florida, if you're planning a crossing to the Bahamas, you can see where the Gulf Stream is. You can see where you're going to pick up that Gulf Stream current. This is another example of sea surface temperature taken from a different screen. This is a Garmin screen. The previous screen was the Simrad screen. So again, we can see the boats over here, and there's a small hot spot. We're going to work the edge of that hot spot if we're fishing, because that's where our best bite activity is going to occur. Again, there is a legend you can bring up on screen to see what those temperatures are. Typically with most of the units, you can also just click on screen and put a cursor anywhere on screen, and it will tell you what the temperature is where you're pointing to that specific spot. So the next information that we provide is buoy and weather station information. Many of the buoys along our waterways have sensors on board that are sending data back to NOAA. And we have a way to pick up that data and broadcast it directly to you. So on your chart plotter, there's going to be a symbol that shows up, and you'll be able to click on that symbol and then bring up information coming from the sensors on board that buoy. Now, not all buoys have the same sensors, so you might click on one and not see the wind direction. It might not have a wind sensor on board, but different buoys, and it just depends on what sensors on board and whether they're operational or not, what information is going to come off that particular device. And then There are also land-based weather stations that operate the same way. There'll be a symbol that appears on screen, and then you can ask it to give you the information that is coming from that station by clicking on it.
So the next feature we want to review is marine zone forecasts. And most of us as boaters at one point or another have listened to that VHF weather report, and it's a bit painful to do so. If you recall, you turn on your VHF, you tune to your weather channel, and it's kind of a garbled report of various marine zones, kind of hard to understand. And for me in particular, inevitably, I always feel like I miss the zone that I'm concerned about. So this is a really simplified way to find out various marine zone reports. So you would simply click in one of these boxes. If you see these various highlighted boxes, you click in one of those boxes, and Dan, if you go to the next screen, and this is an overlay on the Garmin, by the way, and this is an overlay on a Lowrance or a Simrad unit. So in this particular case, there is a highlighted green box right in the middle. You click on that, and then the next screen pulls up a full report once you click on it. And in this particular case, you're looking at 4 pages of information on that particular marine zone. So Dan, if you'll flip back to the previous slide, here's a little, an example. Let's say you are leaving Miami area. If you take your cursor and put it there, yeah, great, thanks, Dan. And you are going all the way around the tip of Florida, around the Keys. You're going to the Dry Tortugas, or you're going somewhere up by Naples. Well, the wind and weather information could be completely different on that side of Florida. So it is useful in your planning if you click on, updated zones, and you can, and for the area you're going to, and then you get a full report there. So a helpful feature that not a whole lot of people know about.
So from here, we'll cover a few questions that we very commonly get asked. First one being about the weather update and how current the information is. And basically, different weather elements update at different rates. Storm radar and lightning, those are our 2 most crucial pieces of information, so they update every 2 to 5 minutes. The wind and wave information updates every 20 minutes, and that's the current wind and wave information. We actually also provide you with forecast information, and that forecast information can go out as far as 48 hours. So for the 48-hour forecast, we only update that every hour. Current conditions every 20 minutes for wind and wave. Sea surface temperature is another one. There's a lot of confusion. And basically the satellite, and it's not our satellite, it's a different satellite that passes over that picks up the sea surface temperature. And that satellite only makes a pass every 6 hours. So the data updates every 6 hours. However, somebody that's running out at 9 o'clock in the morning, the satellite pass may have been 2 hours earlier. So we still want to be able to provide you with that information. So what we do is we resend the most current data we have every 20 minutes. So you won't have to wait 6 hours to get a sea surface temperature report. You should only have to wait 20 or 30 minutes, something along those lines. Next is where the data comes from. Basically, our satellites are only broadcasting the data. The data is coming from several sources, and we've partnered with the folks at TWC. That's the weather company, the folks from the Weather Channel, basically. We've partnered with them. They basically aggregate all the data for us. So lightning information comes from one source. You've got NOAA weather radar coming in, and we've got the Buoy reports coming in that we mentioned. They aggregate all of those pieces of information. They also do the computer model for us for our wind and wave forecasts. So it's a custom computer model that's specifically for the marine environment. And then we uplink that and consequently download it to your receiver on board. Next is coverage area. Our SiriusXM satellites are not like the GPS satellites. They are fixed and hovering over the North America at all times. So we only have service coverage over North America. And this is our satellite footprint. Our signal reaches out to this line right here. So you can be up to about 200 miles off the coast of the Mid-Atlantic and still be able to pick up both SiriusXM Weather and SiriusXM Music. It works throughout the Bahamas, through the Sea of Cortez, and up to the Straits of Juan de la Fuca. So outside that area, not going to work. We don't have, Caribbean would be down here. We do not have coverage in the Caribbean.
All right, before we go on to compatible receiver models, just go back to the coverage screen if you would, Dan. I did want to mention that, so this was really, as I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, really our key features that we just shared with you. There certainly are other features, such as marine warnings. So you can set your chart plotter to pop up warnings if warnings occur in your area or your designated area that you choose. Dan also mentioned that we have animated weather, so it actually shows across your screen the animation, and then forecasts up to 48 hours. Anything else I missed there, Dan?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, great. Let's talk about compatible plotters. So these are the compatible receiver models, and Garmin has the GXM53 receiver. And then going to the right, we have Raymarine, soon to have the SR200 receiver. Just recently had the SR150, and the SR200 will be in stock at your marine retail stores very soon. And then going down to the bottom, the WM3 comes from Simrad, Lowrance, and B&G, the Navico brands. And then we have the Furuno BBWX4, which was recently released in January timeframe. So something to point out here, both the Raymarine SR200 and the Furuno BBWX4 have reduced prices with our $100 rebate, which, by the way, applies to all the receivers, not just Raymarine and Furuno, but with that $100 rebate, they come in at around $399 for the receiver. Of course, you have the service on top of that, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So take advantage of this $100 rebate when you go to purchase your hardware, and then after you subscribe, you just go to SiriusXM.com/marine rebate. It's fairly straightforward. We process quite a few of these. All right, next slide, Dan.
So we also don't want you to forget about what made SiriusXM Radio famous in the first place, and that's our music. Something to know, all of the marine weather receivers that we just talked about can also bring in the music as well, SiriusXM satellite radio, so you can have both music and weather on board using the same device, using the same antenna. Not only that, when you have the SiriusXM Weather subscribed, when you add the audio service, you do get a discount on that audio. So here's what the pricing looks like. We currently have 3 weather data packages starting at $12.99, going up to $54.99. That is important to note. Not all of the chart plotters on the market can utilize all 3 of these packages. Currently, only the Navico brands, Lowrance, Brooks & Gatehouse, and Simrad, can use the marine inland feature. If you have a Garmin or a Raymarine or a Furuno, you're going to be subscribing to Marine Offshore or Marine Coastal. And then I mentioned the audio discount. Our normal prices on audio, our 2 most popular packages are SiriusXM Select and SiriusXM All Access. SiriusXM Select normally $15.99 a month. When you have a weather subscription, it's $10.99 a month. And that $10.99 would apply to if you're subscribed using the same receiver, so you can play music on the boat, or if you also have 2 cars on your same SiriusXM account, those cars would qualify for the discount as well. So $10.99 for Select and $15.99 for our All Access package.
If you're new to SiriusXM Weather and you want to take advantage of a 2-month trial offer, we are currently offering that. And I will point out that this is on our coastal tier of service, not the offshore or the inland tier. The call-in number is this number below, and we circled this for a good reason. We don't like people to call the general SiriusXM number when you simply go to SiriusXM.com and look up an 800 number. It's important that you call this number because we do have a customer care office that's dedicated to our marine and aviation lines of business, and they know exactly what you'll be talking about. If you call in and you simply say, I'd like to take advantage of your 2-month trial offer, and then you provide them the details that you need to provide them to get all set up in your subscription going. So feel free to take advantage of the 2-month trial offer, and you can simply just call that number. Next is getting activated. First and foremost, you have to purchase the compatible hardware that we went over a few minutes ago. Install it. It's a fairly straightforward install. Several people do it themselves, but others have their marine electronics installer install it for them. Then you choose your subscription package that we reviewed a couple slides back, and then you simply visit SiriusXM.com/marine activate, or you call to activate. And again, this number goes directly to that dedicated call center for marine.
So a few tips about getting started. When you call to activate, you're going to need what we call the ESN or radio ID. That's the number that's been assigned to your receiver, and that's the number by which we communicate with your receiver to make it start working. So the radio ID can typically be found on the antenna unit, on the receiver box, on the box that you purchase it in, or you can also bring up that information on your multifunction display. We actually prefer that you use your multifunction display to bring that information in, because if it shows up on your multifunction display, then you already know that it's been hooked up properly and that the ID is displayed there. It's also a little easier to read it off of your display screen. So that's how you locate your radio ID. A few other things when you're activating is to check your signal strength. Now, I mentioned before, we're not like GPS satellites, and typically your display is going to have 2 sets, or even possibly more, depending on how complex your system is, of signal strength information icons. So this is the GPS signal strength icon. We need to ignore that one. We're more curious about this one right here, the SiriusXM satellite signal strength. You need to have at least 2 bars when you're going to activate the service because the receiver needs to be able to hear a good, strong signal from our satellite. So look for that icon and make sure you've got good signal strength when you're activating a unit. Another way to check that the unit is working properly is to go to audio channel 1. Audio channel 1 is always available even to a receiver that doesn't have a subscription. So even in your car, you can go to channel 1 and hear our preview channel where we'll tell you about SiriusXM. So this is an easy way to go and check and make sure your receiver's working if you can go and pick up channel 1. And then lastly, when you first purchase a receiver, it's not set up with a subscription in most cases. You're going to need to get that done. So you call us and you set up your subscription, and then we need to send a signal to it to wake it up so it starts working. We call this a refresh signal. And there are several ways to do that. When you call us, the agent can send a refresh signal right while you're speaking with them on the phone, or if you're activating your unit the night before and then going down to the boat the next day, you can simply go to this website and enter your ID number there, or there's a phone number you can call, and it will either ask you your phone number or your radio ID number, and you can simply say that number into the phone, and it'll send a signal to the unit. Sending a refresh signal is also if your receiver's been turned off for a while. Say you were suspended for the winter, and you go down to the boat, and now we know it's, say you had it set up to come back on April 1st, and you make it down there on April 2nd, you'll need to send a refresh signal. That's what brings the unit back up out of suspense. That's how the refresh signal works.
Dan,
Geoff?
not to mention the fact, too, if your boat sits dormant for a while and the plotter has not been on with the weather receiver, sometimes the signal will stop transmitting, correct?
That's correct. It's basically, the refresh signal is a good troubleshooting method. Anytime you turn your unit on, if after, say, 15 or 20 minutes it's not working, it's a good idea to send it a refresh signal. and that usually will bring them back again.
Yep, and really simple to do, really simple. Dan, can we go back to the radio ID screen, the previous screen?
Sure.
Just a point of clarification that I didn't catch when you were talking about this, and that is that you see this radio ID on your chart plotter. You do not have to have a subscription to the weather to actually see this radio ID. This is where you want to find your radio ID. As long as your weather receiver is connected, then you'll see this radio ID number.
That's right. Good catch.
Okay, let's move forward. Go ahead, Dan.
So basically that's about it. We thank you for listening to our seminar. If you do have any questions, if you want to activate, you can call our Marine Customer Care number at 800-869-5480. If you have any specific technical questions, we do have a support division. They can be reached via email, marine.support@SiriusXM.com. If you'd like to speak with somebody in technical support, simply email us and with a time that you'd like, and we'll call you back and go over any problems you may be having.
We do have several upcoming webinars. If you catch this webinar in time that we're presenting right now, we do have one on May 13th, the 15th, and the 3rd. And I'll just point out the 3rd in particular because that's for anybody that's into fishing. We're going to have co-host Rick Murphy co-hosting this with us, and he's the host of the Florida Insider Fishing Report, and he's going to talk specifically about how SiriusXM Weather is good for anglers and how to really optimize the SiriusXM Weather for your fishing experience. So please join us for those. In addition, Dan and I and the rest of our team are actively working on a whole series of YouTube videos, some how-tos, and some overview videos from one chart plotter manufacturer and weather receiver manufacturer to the next. So stay tuned, more to come, and thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate it. Take care.